I really appreciate the song leaders who, usually the themes that I offer for services are based in a song, and almost all the song leaders take the time to either learn the song or sing that song in our service, and I just really appreciate that. So Prince, thank you this morning for leading in his time. In his time. In his time. He makes all things beautiful in his time. Do you believe that? It's easy to think that when either things are going really well for us, or when we feel that our prayers have been answered quickly. Great. Because oftentimes when we pray, what we mean is not your will be done, but do what I want, how I want, when I want. And we're just looking for God for a rubber stamp of approval on the plan that we have already submitted. Thank you very much. It's easy to pray that way. But what happens when that prayer isn't answered quickly? What happens when there is time of suffering in between, the time when we are pouring out our heart in prayer, and when God intervenes or relieves? In his time. In his time. He makes all things beautiful in his time. Do you believe that? Well, today we're going to open our Bibles to see a father who might have had reason to question that. We're going to open our Bibles to Mark chapter 5 and verse 21, which is going to be on page 490 if you're following along in this blue Bible. 490, Mark chapter 5 and verse 21. And what we're going to see in this text is when God is too late. Mark chapter 5, beginning in verse 21, begins with a father pleading for his daughter's life. Here's how it begins. And when Jesus had crossed again in a boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her, so that she might be made well and live." And he went with him. If this request were offered as a prayer to God, I can only imagine the tears and desperation with which it would be said. My daughter is dying. Please lay your hands on her. Please heal her. Please respond now. She is at the point of death. There is no time for delay. This ruler of the synagogue pleads with Jesus. And I'm grateful for Jesus. That in this moment of this father's desperate pleading, the first answer that he gives him is, and he went with him. Jesus is answering the prayer with his feet, saying, okay, let's go. Unfortunately, travel is not as easy as the father would probably want it to be. Here's what it says. And a great crowd followed him and thronged about him. And we'll just stop there for a second. Can you imagine being Jairus, the father, the one whose daughter is dying, who has gone to Jesus and says, please come, and Jesus says, okay, and now it is nothing but people, wall to wall, back to back, and Jairus, I'm sure, would love for Jesus at this point to have just turned and run, got in the express lane, and off he would go. But it's like Jesus is backed up in the worst traffic ever. We were going up to my mother-in-law's house, and so we've loaded up the car for days. By the way, travel with children, you have to pack half your life and half your house. We've got half of our life and half of our house packed into our van, and our dog too. And we're traveling down I-59. We get just past Chalkville Road, and then our car comes to a dead stop. What we realize as cars they're not even in drive anymore. They have put their cars and parked. Eventually, we even see people walking around outside of their car. We are not going anywhere anytime soon. Because just a mile ahead, at that intersection where they're doing the construction, where they're trying to work on the merge between 459 and 59, someone has wrecked and taken the only available lane. We are stuck. Can you imagine how anxious eventually my heart got as I've got 3 kids and a dog in a car, not going anywhere, for 2 hours? It was awful. That was anxious as my heart got. My daughter wasn't dying on the other side of it. So the stress was just simply, okay, can we get there? What's going to happen with the kids in the meantime? Like it was pretty calm, if you will. But this traffic backup, this great crowd of people that you find there in verse 24, represents only delay in precious moments that his daughter doesn't have. And if anything else in this crowd represented delay, now you meet the biggest delay. Here's what it says. And there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years. She is sick. Who had suffered much under many physicians and had spent all that she had and was no better, but rather grew worse. If I just read that description to you, would you have immense pity for this woman? Oh, sure. She had spent all she had. She had suffered at the hands of physicians. I'm reminded that George Washington did not die of natural causes, but was leeched to death because of medical malpractice. James Garfield died of medical malpractice too, just in case you were curious. And yet, here, she has suffered much at the hands of her physicians. She had heard the reports about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. And immediately the flow of blood dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. And Jesus, perceiving in himself that power had gone out from him, immediately he turned about in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? I want you to just pause and be a little bit incredulous, as the disciples are when they ask. The disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing around you, and yet you say, who touched me? Are you kidding? Everyone has touched you. I don't feel like I have shoulder space. And he looked around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. Can you imagine, being Jairus, again, the father of this 12-year-old girl, who by this point in the sermon you have probably forgotten. Because she's sick, that's where they're on their way to, and he's stopping to have this chat with this woman who has obviously taken some miraculous power from him. The fact, by the way, that he felt the power leave, does that mean he has enough left over? Did she steal the one miracle he had that day? And yet they're stopping to chat. Tick, tick, tick. Those precious moments pass by. And he said to her, I want you to listen to this. Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease. Okay. Whew. That's done. Good. Over. She's fine. She can go in peace. Sorry, I'm speaking from the heart of Jairus for just a moment. But then, here's what it says in verse 35. And while he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" He's too late. There was too much delay. The daughter is dead. Now, this whole event is a tragedy, if you will. But for Jairus, if I were Jairus and I were praying, but what about my daughter? Why her? Why now? Why didn't you answer? And when we pray and we're in distress, isn't that the kind of question that we ask? Why me? Why now? Why haven't you done something yet? In His time, He makes all things beautiful in His time. Do you believe that? I'm going to pause the narration of this story for just a moment. Because up until this point, you probably look at this woman and see nothing but a distraction, a delay, as I'm sure Jairus did. But I want to tell you something about Jairus, and his daughter in particularly. I want to tell you a few things about her. First, I want you to note in verse 23 that this is his daughter. Nothing else need be said but that this is his daughter. But when he comes to her in Matthew chapter 5, verse 23, it says, "My daughter is at the point of death. Come lay on your hands on her so that she would be made well." Keep that in mind. Made well. That's his request. He wants her to be healed. Okay? As much as that is her prayer, or his prayer, I want you to now listen to Jesus' response. Verse 36. So he's now been told that his daughter is dead, and in verse 36, it says, "But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, 'Do not fear, only believe.'" Faith. Okay, that's what Jesus tells him. And these are a few major points in the story. It's his daughter. He wants her to be made well. He is afraid, but he's being told to believe or have faith. Okay? But now I want to tell you the woman's story. Because the first thing that you read about her, after she has come and touched the hem of his garments, and Jesus is standing there saying, "Who touched me?" What she has concluded about Jesus, verse 28, she said, if I touch even his garments, I will be made well. I want you to notice that. Made well. That'll come back. But the first thing that she has is fear in verse 33. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling. I would feel like I just got called to the principal's office. And David, as calm as you are, I would never want to get called into your office. No thanks. She's terrified. And then Jesus responds to her in verse 34. And listen to the words that he says. "Daughter, your faith has made you well." I'll just bring it all up there. You might see these two women as being very different. A 12-year-old girl. A woman who's been sick for a long time. But Jesus doesn't see the woman that way. He doesn't see her as a distraction. He doesn't see her as a delay. He sees her as being similar to this little girl. And their stories are similar. And here's the Feast de Resistance. Here is the climax to me in my heart about what this passage is about. Because I want to highlight, how old's the little girl? She's 12 years old. You see that in chapter 5, verse 42. How long has the woman been sick? For 12 years. In God's eyes, these women are the same. And he looks to her and he says, "Daughter, Your faith has made you well. Jesus wasn't making a choice here to save the woman and disregard the little girl. He sees them as one and the same. And to me, that gives me reassurance when I pray to him. That he would look at me and say, child, my child, do not fear. Your faith has made you well. What a beautiful picture. But nonetheless, the travesty of the situation is the same. God is too late for this little girl, for this 12-year-old girl. It feels like he's too late. Let's finish this story. Here's what it says. Then they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw the commotion, people weeping and wailing. And when he had entered, he said to them, why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. I want to just pause there. They realize how ridiculous that is. They know she's dead. Can I quote Miracle Max for just a moment? Maybe she's only mostly dead. It says, and they laughed at him, but he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in where the child was. And taking her by the hand, he said to her, Talitha kumi, which means, little girl, I say to you, arise. Can I just pause there for a moment? I've heard it reflected concerning this passage that that's the kind of thing that you would say to your little girl to wake her up in the morning. Talitha kumi. Or if you're in my mom's house, rise and shine and give God the... She woke us up with singing every day. But here, he says, little girl, get up. And immediately, the girl got up and began walking, for she was of 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement, and he strictly charged them that no one should know this, and told them to give her something to eat. Was God too late? No. So let me now just give 3 lessons concerning God and his timing from this passage. First, time is not a barrier for God. When it's not in our timing, when it's not in the chronology that we think it should happen, it doesn't remove God being able to do something wonderful with it. Time isn't a barrier for God. And it wasn't for him here. He didn't arrive too late. Like a wizard, he arrived precisely when he meant to. Sorry, another nerd reference, just in case you want one. But oftentimes when we pray, it's not your will be done. It's my will, my way, my time. And when that time has elapsed, we think, oh no, God didn't answer my prayer. Timing isn't a barrier to God. Second, he might have a bigger plan. I'm reminded in this story of the 2 sisters of Lazarus, who sent word to Jesus, by the way, in plenty of time, that he might come to Bethany and heal Lazarus. They said, the one that you love is dying. And do you know what Jesus did? He waited for 4 days. He didn't go. Why? By the time he arrives, the 2 sisters separately look at Jesus and say, if you had only been here, my brother would not have died. If you had only been here, my brother would not have died. If you had answered my prayer when I asked you, none of this would have happened. But Jesus didn't come for a healing. He came to bring a resurrection. He had something bigger planned. He had something bigger planned here. And that bigger might even be better. And third, most of all, when he says to the woman, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. I know that Jesus loved that woman. And I know that he loved Jairus and this daughter too. Even though he didn't operate in their timing, it didn't remove the fact that he came to that little girl and spoke as a mother would be raising her child in the morning, Talitha Kumi. Little girl, it's time to get up. He loved her too. So what happens when God is too late? What happens when we've been praying for my way, my will, my way, my time? Well, timing is not a barrier for God. He might have a bigger plan, and he still loves you.